When our museum was destroyed by fire in 1978, we were already in the process of taking over this building. We hadn't made any definitive moves yet. Aircraft hadn't, unfortunately, been moved out of the other facility, and we ended up losing quite a bit. The museum had to start from square one. One of the first things that was determined is we really wanted to have a Spirit of St. Louis replica, another one, just like the one we had lost in the fire. So in 1979, some of the original people who worked to build the original NYP back in 1926 and 27 actually came out of retirement to help us. Two of the original build crew, plus the original owner of the company, came out of retirement to help us build this. We built two almost identical copies. One of them is on display down at the airport, and we kept this one for ourselves. It is a flyable replica. We flew it back in the late 70s. We flew it again in 2003. It does take quite a bit to take a museum replica aircraft and make it flyable, but with the staff that we had on hand at the time, we were able to make it a workable project both of those times. It's been our plan for years to try to do it again for the 2027 100th anniversary. It's a very difficult process, and we're still not certain if our museum is going to be able to do that, but we certainly like the idea of returning this aircraft to flight. The original flew for 33 and a half hours, carrying Lindbergh not just across the Atlantic, but into the history books. When he did that, he set fire to entire generations of airmen and women around the planet. So many records fell in the years after his famous flight across the Atlantic, and almost all of those were a direct result of people just wanting to emulate the incredible achievement of Charles Lindbergh. Our museum replica is substantially the same, but in some ways it's quite a bit different from the original. Instead of a 450-gallon set of 5 fuel tanks, ours only has one. We're never going to fly it more than around the San Diego area, so there's a single 50-gallon fuel tank in there. When we've asked the test pilot how the aircraft flies, he says that we have replicated its poor flying capabilities perfectly. The original was quite a handful to fly, and we know for a fact that Lindbergh only flew it with completely full gas tanks one time, and that was to cross the Atlantic. The original was built about 1.5 miles away from here, right down by the airport, at the old Ryan facility. It was one of the last of the original companies from the airport back in the 20s that finally was taken over and was dismantled in approximately 15 years ago. Until then, there were traces of the Ryan company still at our local airport. There are several amazing things about his flight, and probably the most amazing thing is not the endurance, it was the accuracy at which he flew. Using just a compass, and magnetic compasses are famous for being off, he was able to fly all the way across the Atlantic, and when he made landfall in Ireland, he was only 2 miles away from his intended land point. That's pretty good over a stretch of almost 2,000 miles. He was able to fly into Orly Airport. At the time, it wasn't a very advanced facility. He landed in the middle of the night in front of thousands of people. It was quite an interesting experience for him. He'd been up for more than a day and a half, and he was suddenly rushed by these thousands of people. They substantially damaged the airplane. There were quite a few people taking little pieces of fabric off. So when the aircraft was brought back to America for the big celebration, people from the Ryan company had to recover the whole aircraft, make it new again on the ship as it was being shipped back to the States.